And the cleric continued on. The cleric awoke and found himself imprisoned in a different land, a different time from Boletaria. How many years had passed since he carried the presence of the goddess to a godless realm? What was he doing in this prison cell, and why was he sent here by his matron? Why could he no longer use his magic, and why did he feel so weak? It seems the goddess had further plans for the cleric, and they would require him to start from humble beginnings once again. He trusted the goddess's plan and began thinking of ways to escape this place and to bring her light to this new world. The goddess would not have him go it alone, though, as he was assisted in his flight almost immediately by another traveler on a mission. The goddess would guide him, and he would once again be her instrument in a hostile land. And the cleric continued on. Taking in his surroundings, he noticed he was trapped with undead humans that did not pay him any attention but were consumed by their own grief. A stomping to his right drew his attention, and he saw one of the many threats he would need to deal with in time. He entered a large courtyard cautiously, as he was still unsure about what this new place had in store for him. His caution paid off as a humongous demon dropped in front of him and prepared to attack. The cleric, recognizing he was not equipped for this battle, hastily escaped until he could find some means to protect himself. Soon after, he discovered his trusty mace was placed here for him. It was drained of all of its power, but he was pleased to see the familiar weapon. The goddess's fingerprints were everywhere so far, and he knew that she would aid, but would not do this for him. It would be up to the cleric to overcome the evil of this land, and this was a good start. He soon encountered the friendly knight Oscar that had helped him earlier to escape his cell. It seemed this knight was breathing his last breaths and would soon be leaving this world. With one more act of kindness, the swordsman bequeathed a magical flask to the cleric that would heal his wounds and provide him with encouraging words. "Rest well, friend," the cleric thought, and thanked him for his help. Shortly after, the cleric found a talisman and could feel his connection to the goddess strengthen, as a slight amount of his power returned to him. He could use his divine magic once more, but he would need to grow his arsenal, as the cleric was still in a severely diminished state. Armed with his mace, his magic, and the guiding hand of the goddess, he was ready. He found a ledge above the demon that ambushed him and leapt. The cleric delivered a crushing blow to the fiend from the heavens and quickly finished the guardian off with a few more swings of his weapon. The demon fell and dropped the key to the exit of the prison. He approached the cliff edge and was confused as there was nowhere else to go. He did not have to wait long as a massive bird snatched him in its clutches and flew him off to start his journey properly. He would arrive at the Firelink Shrine shortly, and along the way his goddess would give him instructions. He had several objectives in his journey, and many did not make sense upon first hearing them. The cleric was to restore his holy mace to its former glory. He was to defeat every demon controlling each area of this land. He would need to destroy the Father of Darkness and Despair. He must help everyone he encountered that needed his assistance. He was to bring an end to the fallen god Gwyn. And finally, he was to bring back light to this land. Upon his arrival at Firelink Shrine, the cleric met a fellow cleric who would teach him the ways of divine magic and Lordran, and he met a warrior who was firmly in the throes of despair. He was told of the 2 bells of awakening he would need to ring to enter Anor Londo, and their approximate locations. One other thing he discovered was that these men had madness creeping into their souls, and he feared it was too late to help them. He would need to return to this later. He set his sights on a city filled with the undead, and headed out to see where he could be most useful. Surely the path ahead would be filled with danger, but it did not matter. The goddess gave her decree, and he would carry out her wishes. He met an undead merchant soon after his departure and noticed there was a key for sale, which he purchased along with an upgrade to his armor. He was not a fan of chainmail, but he was sure he could find his preferred plate somewhere in this land. The cleric encountered the first of Gwyn's guards, the Black Knights, and approached cautiously. His caution was once again rewarded as the knight swung his sword at the cleric with the intent to kill. The cleric anticipated the attack and deflected it easily enough, and delivered a deadly blow with his mace to the large opponent. The Black Knight fell, and many more would, before his journey was over. The fog returned and caused barriers to pass through once more, and these, from his experience, always meant danger was ahead. The cleric cautiously moved across the bridge and was not disappointed as a hulking minotaur jumped from the tower he was facing. A short battle ensued, but the cleric was now well versed in dealing with large demons, and the beast fell dead within minutes. He met another friendly knight named Solaire, and the two talked of cooperation and beauty of the sun. They took in the sights and both reflected on their missions, before the cleric wished Solaire well and hoped he would see the kind warrior once more. A bridge that was charred and still slightly smoking was in front of the cleric now, and he could see no other way around what he needed to do. He would need to sprint and evade the fiery trap he knew was surely there. The cleric was patient though, and waited for his moment. As soon as the drake left its perch, the cleric sprinted forward and found himself safely on the other side. He found an altar that he was hesitant to interact with, but the goddess assured him he could make a covenant with this sect, as he would need the power they supplied in order to carry out the divine plan. The cleric followed the guidance provided to him, and he was rewarded with the ability to hurl lightning bolts from his hands. The goddess was impressed with the magic of this land, and gave her blessing to use these electric bolts, as Gwyn no longer deserved to call them his own. Further into the area, the cleric met a blacksmith named Andre, who would help him in his quest. He would help restore his mace, but he would need certain blessed embers to do so. The cleric made a note of this request, and would keep his eyes open for such wondrous items. As the cleric continued his exploration, he came across a large fortress with its gates shut tight. This is where he needed to go once he had rung the bells, but he noticed a peculiar knight sitting out front. This gentle soul, clad in armor, designed after an onion, sat and thought upon his predicament of how to move forward into the fortress. His name was Sigmire, and he seemed content waiting for the gates to open on their own. The cleric smiled and wished him well, and he left the gates to pursue his own goals. He then met another knight clad in gold armor, locked in a jail cell behind a boarded-up doorway. He got an uneasy feeling about this man, but could not just let him rot in a cell. The cleric knew he would be useful later on, but also could sense the man was dangerous. The goddess gave no advice on the matter, so the cleric decided to do him a kindness and release him from his confinement. Hopefully, he would not regret his decision. The cleric proceeded into the lower section of the undead city and could hear the cries for help from another person locked in a room. Using the key he had purchased from the undead merchant, he freed Griggs the sorcerer and gave him directions on returning to Firelink's shrine. Bandits and undead dogs attacked the cleric while he made his way through the portion of the city, but none could stop him. He was growing stronger and slowly reaching his true power level once again. He encountered another foggy gateway and prepared for battle. The demon of this area moved quickly and attacked the cleric as soon as he entered its arena, but the cleric expected the attack and dodged under the machetes the monster wielded. He slew the two canines immediately and set his sights on the goat demon. Once the fight was one-on-one, the demon did not stand a chance. Its attacks were too weak to break the cleric's guard and too slow to land true against the holy warrior. The cleric picked his moments and slowly broke the monster down. An electric bolt tore through the sky from the hand of the cleric, and the demon was no more. The cleric continued on. He found the key to the sewers on the demon he had just slain and descended further into the underbelly of the city. He hurled his lightning at a ghoulish butcher and turned it to ashes. He found an ember for blacksmithing, but it was not the divinely touched ones he would need. This would help, but he had other plans for this mace. In the next room, he heard more pleas for help from another trapped person. It seems the ghouls were planning on eating this pyromancer, so the cleric freed him and sent him to Firelink's shrine as well. He was doing the work of the goddess and spreading her love and mercy across Lordran, and the cleric was happy knowing he was helping so many people. The cleric returned to Firelink's shrine and greeted Griggs, and was pleased to see he had made it safely here. 3 more adventurers had shown up to the shrine as well, and the cleric went to introduce himself. 2 additional clerics and a priestess were now present, and the cleric went to say hello and see if he could assist them in their journey. He was clearly not wanted, nor respected by his fellow clerics, as they dismissed him and talked down to the cleric. Disappointed in their behavior, he left them alone and hoped they had a safe journey into the catacombs where they were heading. He stopped to say hello to Laurentius the pyromancer, who had also made it safely back to the shrine. He did not have time for small talk, though, as there was much to be done. He bid everyone in the shrine farewell and asked the goddess to bless them before heading out to train for his next task. When he arrived back, he had noticed that the 2 new clerics and Rhea the priestess had departed, but Petrus was still here. This confused the cleric as Petrus was escorting Rhea to the catacombs. When the cleric asked about it, Petrus explained he had become separated from the priestess in the darkness of the catacombs, and he could not find her. Lautric, the knight, told a different story, however. One of Petrus abandoning her in the darkness. When confronted, Petrus confessed that she was helpless and her 2 other companions had gone mad. He seemed thrilled about this. What kind of a cleric was this to leave a helpless person alone in a land of death and horrors? This Petrus was not only a coward, but he also reveled in Rhea's suffering. The cleric would not stand for this, but he also could not charge down into the catacombs at his current strength. Rhea would have to wait for him to arrive, and he would try to get there as soon as possible. For the time being, he asked the goddess to look after her until he could take on the catacombs. He did not know if the goddess would honor his request, but he knew she was just and kind and always shone her light on those who needed it. He would not make a move against Petrus, as being a coward was not a crime, but he would watch him very closely moving forward. He did not know why, but he was pulled into the Darkroot Basin as his next destination. He could sense a faded holy aura coming from that location, so he went to investigate further. He climbed a tower and was met with another mist-filled passage. Knowing what this meant, he prepared himself for battle and proceeded in. He saw a large butterfly bathed in moonlight, and his instincts kicked in before the demon could get an attack off. He launched his bolts at the giant insect and received arcane blasts in return. The cleric was quick though, and was able to avoid the heavy magic attacks of the butterfly, and dropped it with one final lightning burst while taking 3 projectiles in return. It wasn't pretty, but the deed was done. The cleric climbed the tower on the other end of the bridge and found the source of the holy aura. One of the divine embers he had been searching for was now his. The cleric continued on. He felt strong enough to return to the prison where his journey began, to challenge the demon roaming in the depths of the building. He walked into the courtyard where he fought the first massive demon and began searching for ways to get down to where he needed to go. As he entered the center of the area, the floor collapsed beneath his weight and he fell right in front of the demon he had come to hunt. This demon was incredibly tough, seemingly shrugging off the cleric's mace and magic. But the cleric was patient and danced around the demon, taking his shots where he could. Patience was one of the greatest weapons in his arsenal, after all, and another foe had fallen to it. This place was also filled with black knights the cleric would tear through. They were strong, but his mace was designed to bash through armor, and it proved its worth once more. Before leaving, he heard moving on the floor above him and decided to check it out. Oscar wasn't dead after all, and the cleric felt relieved to see him moving around, until the knight rushed at the cleric with his weapon drawn. Madness had overtaken the knight. This was not the kind man who had helped free him. No. This was a man who seemingly lost what made him human and replaced his soul with nothing. This was a man in name only. A soulless, mindless, bloodthirsty beast was all that remained of Oscar. The cleric didn't want to destroy the body of the knight, but Oscar was already gone. At least this way he could find true peace. His work in the prison was complete, and it was time to go back to the Firelink Shrine to prepare for his next tasks in the sewers. The cleric retraced his steps back into the dark and wet structure that was the sewer system, and fought all manner of beasts and monsters along the way. He realized that the rats down here were full of humanity they had consumed from feasting on dead bodies. This was truly a horrible place, but he would not know how bad it would get yet. He eventually arrived at another fog-filled passage and prepared himself for what lay ahead. He stepped into a large cistern, and before him emerged an eldritch horror he was not expecting. Teeth and ribs protruded from the dragon's abdomen as it reared back and let out a primal cry as it advanced on the cleric. The cleric took in this twisted creature and set to work. The dragon's thick hide made the battle long, but in the end it was simply no match for the cleric's mace and lightning. As it died, the dragon coughed up a key it had been holding to the large metal doors just beyond the entrance to its chamber, a key to a place named Blighttown. The cleric was no stranger to disease and poison-infested areas, and this would be no different than before. He fought his way down to the swamps below, and his body was flooded with the poison of the area as soon as his foot touched the deadly slurry that was the ground. As he made his way to a safe area to rest, he felt the fabric of time and reality break slightly, as he knew he was now being hunted by something or someone from another place. A crazed woman rushed him with a giant cleaver, but her manic swings were no contest for the calm and controlled cleric. She fell to his mace like so many had, like so many would. He found an exit to the town and decided to take a break from this world of poison as he found new materials to upgrade his flask of healing magic. When he returned to the Firelink Shrine, he found the Firekeeper had been slain, and Lautrec was nowhere to be found. His kindness was rewarded with the murder of an innocent person. He had regretted his decision to free the knight, and he would bring the man to justice. The cleric decided to stop by Andre with materials he had collected to see if the blacksmith could do anything with them. By the grace of the goddess, he had found what was needed for his mace to be infused with holy power. He was becoming stronger, and with his divine weapon back in his hand, he was confident he could complete the wishes of the goddess. He returned to the poison swamps to confront the evil that was ruling over this place. He found the misty portal and braced for the battle that was to come. A large spider walked forth, covered in flames and magma, with a human female's torso on top of it. The witch smirked suggestively at the cleric, but he saw only a malicious being that needed to be stopped. The cleric charged into battle against the witch, holy magic and divine mace ready. He dodged and blocked the burning attacks the servant of chaos threw and countered with his lightning and blessed mace. The witch fell, and the cleric found the first bell beyond her chamber. One down, one to go. The cleric proceeded beyond the chamber further into the magma-filled cavern and came across a massive fire-spitting beast. He rushed back to the entrance to this monster's lair as there was a large drop-off that the fiend could not cross. Except, the demon jumped at the cleric and was hanging onto the side of the cliff with one arm. The cleric knew he would not have to overwhelm this challenge, he would just need to make it lose its grip. A few strikes of his mace and the hulking magma creature fell. The cleric continued on. He made his way to the second bell atop a church he had passed through before. He found the gateway and knew a new challenge was ahead. He entered the fog and dropped onto the roof of the building, and he looked for what would present itself as his next obstacle. A gargoyle let out a roar as it descended on the cleric and swung hard with his halberd. But the cleric blocked the swing and claimed the gargoyle's tail in his counterattack. It was clear the gargoyle could not withstand the holy weapon and called for reinforcements. The gargoyle would be dead before backup could arrive, though, and the cleric set his sights on the second of the creatures. It was short work, and the second fell as quickly as the first. Sun shone down on the cleric after the battle, and he felt the goddess's warmth as he proceeded up the tower to ring the second bell that would allow him to enter the fortress. The gate no longer blocked his path. The cleric entered the fortress and fought hordes of snake men and evaded traps until he found the gentle Sigmire contemplating his next move. The cleric would clear the traps, stopping the Onion Knight, and hoped to see him again in his journey. Exploring the fortress, the cleric found another person imprisoned. The cleric freed the man named Logan, using a key he had found earlier, and provided him with the knowledge he would need to make it safely back to Firelink Shrine. The cleric spent some time exploring the fortress and decided to check the shrine to see if Logan made it back safely. He was relieved to see Logan was safe and thinking about his next move. The cleric continued on. He returned to the fort to face the final challenge it had to offer. A golem made of pure iron stood guarding the way forward, but the construct's slow attacks were no challenge for the cleric's bludgeoning weapon and electrical magic. Soon, the golem collapsed, and the cleric was victorious. Demons descended and lifted the cleric up and brought him to the city of Gwen, Anorlando. The city was magnificent, but eerily quiet. The juxtaposition of the splendor of the architecture combined with the haunting quiet made the cleric very uneasy as he proceeded further into the area. He crossed rafters, fought guards, and even more gargoyles as he advanced toward his goal. The cleric spotted a several stories tall painting, and he could feel magic radiating off of it. He approached cautiously and inspected the canvas. The goddess told him this was a portal to another world, and he would need to enter. The cleric placed his hand on the painting and was pulled inside. He proceeded through the painted landscape until he came across Priscilla. She spoke softly and did not menace the cleric, but was more curious about him. They spoke briefly, and the cleric did not want to harm this person and began to leave. But the goddess told him what she was, the enemy of all life. She was the Life Hunter, and the cleric was a guardian of life. The cleric let loose a lightning strike at the goddess's command, and the battle commenced. He felt firsthand the life hunt abilities of Priscilla and realized what a threat she could be. Her tricks would not work on the cleric, though, and she fell to his divine mace. Having bested the half-dragon, the cleric received a message from the goddess to jump from the end of the walkway, and he would be transported out of the world. The cleric's faith in the goddess could not be swayed, and he leapt. The cleric returned to Anorlando and explored further. He came across Solaire once again and enjoyed a conversation with him as a nice break from the hostilities of this place. Having rested, he pressed further into the palace and met Sigmire once more. The gentle knight was trapped as he had 3 silver guardians blocking his path, and he was considering his options. The cleric cleared the path and returned to let Sigmire know he could continue his adventure. The cleric was growing quite fond of the Onion Knight and was pleased to help him whenever he could. Not much later, the cleric would find a set of silvered plate armor that the knights of this area wore. His preferred defenses now donned, he would move forward into the heart of the city. As he made his way to the final chambers of Anorlando, he could sense time and reality ripple once more, and he knew Lautrec was somewhere nearby. He activated the black eye orb he found on the poor slain firekeeper's body, and was pulled into a different world. The coward had 2 lackeys with him now, but it did not stop the cleric from going on the attack. Both of the underlings would drop, leaving only Lautrec to face the cleric. Lautrec swung his curved blade at the cleric, but the cleric was waiting for this exact move. He deflected the blow and swung his mace into the golden armored knight, sending him to the afterlife. He retrieved the soul of the firekeeper, and the goddess was pleased, and told the cleric to treat it with care, as she would revive the firekeeper if he brought it back to her body. The goddess's kindnesses were limitless, and the cleric gave thanks. One last barrier in this city, and beyond it would be 2 great warriors that would need to be toppled. Ornstein was quick and danced around the battlefield, while Smo would be waiting for the cleric to drop his guard for even a second. The battle was tough, but the cleric was able to drop Ornstein to the ground. The honorable knight was bested, but alive. Smo, sensing his opportunity to gain Ornstein's power, delivered the coup de grace to the fallen knight and absorbed his strength. The cleric watched this display of barbarism, horrified at what he had just seen. This Smo had no honor, and no love for his fallen companion and friend. He was laughing at the cruelty he had just inflicted, mocking the cleric by reveling in the disgusting act of betrayal. The cleric remained calm and methodical. He would show this vile man how to wield lightning and how to swing a hammer. Smo was aggressive, but the cleric was in control. The wild, heavy attacks of the executioner were no match for the calm mind and soul of the cleric, and he soon fell. The cleric ascended to the top of the palace and opened the final doors, revealing a woman who appeared to have been waiting for him to arrive. The cleric laughed to himself at her attempt to distort and muddle his mind, but she was not even half of the goddess's beauty, and he had given his heart to her long ago. He was given the Lord Vessel for his journey, and he thanked Guinevere for her assistance. The cleric continued on. He returned to the sunlight altar and found Solaire looking out to the sun, wondering where he should search next. He mentioned Lost Izalith as his possible next destination, and the cleric wished him well and hoped he would see him again. The cleric returned to Firelink Shrine to see if there were any new developments, and found Sigmire had returned as well. They conversed about the gates to the fortress being opened, and the good knight gifted the cleric with knowledge of a new divine magic. Sigmire and Solaire were welcome rays of positivity in this world, and the cleric was glad to have met them several times along his path, and hoped he would continue to do so. He brought the firekeeper's soul back to her body, and, as promised, the goddess brought her back to life. The sins of Lautrec had been paid for, and the situation remedied. The cleric praised the goddess for her kindness and benevolence before heading to his next objective. He met the King Seeker, Frampt, next, and was taken to the door of the kiln. Here he placed the Lord Vessel, and was told there were no more boundaries blocking his way. The Lord's souls must be collected before he could confront Gwyn, and that was a day he was looking forward to, as the fallen god had much to answer for. The Lord's souls would need to wait, however, as there were a few loose ends to tie up. First, the imprisoned knight of Havel would be laid to rest after years of confinement. The knight was released from this world and could join his brethren in the afterlife. Next, the Hydra threatening the area would need to be dealt with. The many-headed serpent was quickly eliminated with a few well-placed bolts of lightning and was no more. In the same area, a golden golem was found, and the cleric made short work of this creature as well. Upon its defeat, it released a maiden named Dusk, who requested the cleric's assistance in the land of Ulasil, well in the past. The cleric agreed, as he knew this is where the goddess would require him to travel to before his work was complete in Lordran. The time to hunt the Lord's souls was now upon him, and he decided to head to Lost Izalith first. He met Sigmire once more in the poison swamps, and provided him with some moss that would help the gentle knight traverse the poison-filled land. The cleric met the fair lady on his path, and she opened a path for him that would prove invaluable to him and his allies. As the cleric descended, he once again felt reality tear, and was attacked by a warrior covered in spiked armor. This was not the first time he had encountered this Kirk, and the cleric quickly banished the attacker back to his own realm. Further along, the cleric encountered a demon that looked very similar to ones he had faced prior, and removed this one from the world in the same way as the prior encounters. Another demon fell, and the fiends were dropping quickly before the cleric's magic and divine weapon. It would not be long now before he would confront Gwyn himself. Just a few paces outside the arena he had battled the fire sage, the cleric encountered another large demon. This one an insect that could not be harmed by the flames and magma it walked in. The insect launched attacks, but in the end, it could not survive the cleric's lightning. He encountered Solaire in a chamber of the underground, and was saddened that Solaire was no longer his jolly, upbeat self. He counseled the Sunlight Warrior and encouraged him to keep searching, as there was no such thing as impossible given enough time and patience. The cleric bid Solaire farewell and began to explore the area. Time had passed, and the cleric encountered Solaire once more. The once proud champion of sunlight was not his former self. Despair had taken hold of the man, and he questioned his own existence and goals. The night was done, taken by the ever-creeping sadness of this world. He would remain himself, though, and would not become hollowed out like so many others. A bittersweet end to the kind man's journey for his own son. The cleric left the despondent knight, and asked the goddess to look over him. Getting closer to the Lord of Izalith, the cleric was attacked by a witch, while reality split again and Kirk re-emerged. The witch fell to the cleric's lightning, and Kirk tried his best, but the cleric had no time for this invader. There was a Lord soul to collect just around the corner. The cleric entered the throne room of the Lord, the bed of chaos. The cleric took in his environment and sprung his attack. The magical barriers on either side of the tree were quickly eliminated, and he just needed to now attack the middle. He timed his rush and avoided the attacks of the Lord, but just barely. He ran for the middle and broke through to the heart of the tree, where he found a simple bug. He drew back his mace and flattened the insect, releasing the soul of the Lord. He had collected one, but there were 3 to go. The cleric continued on. Finally, it was time to enter the tombs. Death ruled this domain and would try to push the cleric out at every turn. He would not be deterred, as he could sense Rhea was still alive and needing help. His divine mace and holy magic were cutting through every enemy the Lord of Death threw his way, as the cleric was a champion of life and light. A large sarcophagus stood open before him, inviting the cleric to drop inside. The cleric accepted and was confronted by Pinwheel, the keeper of the Rite of Kindling. Pinwheel tried its tricks on the cleric, but no illusion could fool him, as he saw true. A lightning bolt nearly cut the entity in half, and the cleric finished the fight with a few swings of his mace. The Rite of Kindling was now the goddess's, and the cleric moved out of the structure and explored deeper into the tombs. Giant skeletons attempted to block his way, but he struck from above as if from the heavens and crushed the animated corpses. It was then he discovered the second holy ember Andre had spoken of so long ago. He would infuse his mace with even more blessed power, but that would need to wait, as Rhea was still trapped. Deeper he would go into this land of death. Out of the darkness stood a man. No, not a man. A hyena, presented to look like a man. He had seen this person before, but he could not remember where. But he did not trust him, and Patches did not like the cleric. The cleric looked over the edge to see if Rhea was down below, as he recalled her falling into a pit from Lautrec in Petrus's story. As he was looking into the darkness, the hyena shoved him into the pit and began mocking him. Patches was an arrogant fool, however, and did not understand the magic and power of the cleric. In time, hyena, in time. The cleric found Rhea and ensured she was safe. He quickly dealt with the 2 mad clerics, as their gods paled in comparison to the goddess. They had lost their way well before entering this land, and it was apparent with their interactions with him in Firelink Shrine. The cleric helped Rhea to escape the land of the dead and returned her to the chapel above Firelink Shrine. Rhea taught the cleric new holy magic to use in his battles ahead, while the cleric comforted her by letting her know what happened to her compatriots was not her fault. She should not blame herself or give in to despair, as there was still much to do. He left Rhea alone to pray and headed back to the catacombs to confront Patches. The hyena was very aggressive. It had more confidence than skill and attacked the cleric with no effect. The grave robber was swatted aside without much effort, as his feeble attacks could not break the cleric's guard. Patches would harm no one else in this world. The cleric could sense he was getting close to Nito, lord of this area, and Nito could also tell his end was approaching. A ripple in reality once again as a paladin rushed forward at the cleric. The ledge was narrow, and the cleric had the reach advantage, and hurled lightning into the paladin's chest. The paladin was banished from this world, but he left behind the blessed shield Sanctus. The goddess instructed the cleric to claim the shield in her name and carry it forward. The cleric smiled and happily honored the request. The cleric confronted the Grave Lord and stared down the ruler of this land as he released his miasma and poison upon the divine warrior. The cleric, calmly, readied a lightning bolt and hurled it into the Lord, felling Nito with his holy gifts. The cleric had seen so much of this land and was growing angrier and angrier with Gwyn for letting his people suffer so much because of his own fear. The fallen god was a tyrant, consumed with his own self-interests, letting his champions fall and die, or worse, become hollowed out and go mad. This Gwyn had no love for his people, his servants, or this world, only for himself. He was getting closer and closer to Gwyn, and Gwyn knew it. The cleric planned his next steps that would include Gwyndolin, the inept son of Gwyn, as the first problem to deal with. The cleric entered Gwyndolin's chambers and was met with insults, threats, and illusions. The cleric rushed down Gwyndolin and introduced him to what divine power really looked like. Gwyndolin was bested quickly, as he was all bluster and threats, and the cleric's mace did not care about the son of Gwyn's posturing. The cleric was confronted by a warrior in brass armor, a loyalist to the weak god Gwyndolin. The cleric provided the opportunity for the brass warrior to join her god in the afterlife. From Inner Londo, the cleric entered the Duke's archives, preparing to confront Seath the betrayer. He climbed to the top of the stairs and entered the Duke's chamber. He launched a lightning bolt at Seath, as Seath released a magical blast. The cleric's magic had no effect on the dragon, and didn't even leave a scratch on him. The cleric woke up locked in the prison of the Duke and took in his surroundings. The guard to his cell was foolishly within striking range of the bars, and the cleric took him out, removing the key to the cell in the process. He had escaped prison once again. He made his way to the bottom of the tower and found Logan had also been taken prisoner. He asked Logan to hold on as he would be back to free him once he found the key. He continued exploring the tower when he opened a cell and was face to face with Rhea, now hollowed. The cleric could not believe what he was seeing, as the once faithful servant of Gwyn now was attacking him with her fists in a fervor reserved for rabid animals needing to be put down. Gwyn had failed her too, had failed everyone, and another soul was claimed by his cowardice and self-importance. The cleric, seeing no other way, brandished his mace, the weapon of a true deity, and ended Rhea's suffering for good. Maiden Rhea was laid to rest, and the cleric's ire grew. He made his way back to Logan's cell after exploring the archives further and freed the sorcerer from his confinement. Logan was grateful and planned to stay in the archives to study the Duke's tomes further, perhaps to uncover mystical secrets and knowledge. He told the cleric of the crystal granting Seath his imperviousness and where to find the relic, and the cleric knew he must destroy it if he were to challenge the betrayer once more. In the field behind the archives, the cleric encountered another golden golem and slew it, knowing these were walking prisons. Upon the final blow, another knight of Katarina appeared before him. Her name was Sigland, the daughter of the gentle Sigmire, and she had come to Lordran searching for her father. The cleric let her know he had seen the knight several times and that he was somewhere in the land. If he saw her again, the cleric would update Sigland on her father's whereabouts, assuming he had an update for her. They could both search for him in the meantime. The cleric entered the crystal caves and fought his way to the cavern holding the key to Seath's immortality. He approached the artifact and was attacked by the Duke himself. He waited until the betrayer was in range and smashed the crystal with one decisive blow. As Seath reared back, the cleric launched his lightning bolt straight into the heart of the dragon. With his immortality gone, Seath could do nothing but watch on as the cleric flung bolt after bolt into the betrayer, bringing him down in minutes. The third Lord Soul was now collected, and there was just one to go. The cleric stopped by to speak with Logan once more, but found he was gone. He checked the archives, but was unable to find the sorcerer until he climbed to the top of the tower. Here he saw Logan had stripped off his clothing, save his iconic hat, and had also gone mad. Another one. The cleric thought as he sidestepped the sorcerer's spells and attacks. How many more must be lost to this place that has been forsaken by the god that was meant to protect it? Fear not, Logan, thought the cleric. It is time to sleep now. The cleric prepared a final bolt for the former renowned spellcaster and let loose the fatal blow. The cleric continued on. He returned to Firelink Shrine once more to prepare for his next set of tasks, and noticed that Laurentius had now disappeared. He recalled the pyromancer mentioning the Great Swamp, so the cleric descended to Blighttown once more to see if he could find the man. The cleric let out a heavy sigh, as Laurentius too had been hollowed out by this world. How many former allies and friends had he slain at this point, due to their loss of self and their own humanity? Was this Gwyn's way of trying to stop him? Using his former friends and allies as shields and spears? The coward. Gwyn could not stop the inevitability of the cleric being face to face with him. He was a desperate and pathetic god who used his loyal servants and people of this world like pawns. Your time is almost up, false god, the cleric spoke under his breath. I will see you soon. He returned to Firelink Shrine, sad for the loss of another ally. He spoke with Siglinde, and she informed the cleric that her father had gone on his last adventure. The cleric smiled at this, as Sigmire was the last ray of positivity in this land he had encountered, and the good knight seemed unbreakable. The cleric prepared, but as he did so, the goddess spoke to him. The Father of Darkness awaits you, cleric. Bring my light to him. Yes, goddess, it will be done. He traveled to where the tear in time and space was located and approached cautiously. A large hand sprung forth from the portal and grabbed the cleric, dragging him into the abyss where Manus awaited him. The cleric found himself in the land of Ulasil and began his journey immediately. A guardian sprung forth and launched a ball of lightning at the cleric, but it was easily dodged. The cleric put his bolts away and decided the mace was the best tool for this enemy. His swings were true, and his blows were punishing, and the guardian of the sanctuary collapsed on the ground. The cleric was focused, and was intent on destroying this Manus and his abyss, and nothing would stand in his way. He soon encountered the legendary knight Artorius, consumed by darkness and the abyss. A mere shadow of what he once was according to the stories the cleric had heard. He studied his moves and attacks, and found the openings he needed. The knight was strong, but without his mind intact, he was just another ravenous beast to be put down. The knight fell, unable to withstand the damage from the holy mace, and the deed was done. The knight Artorius had earned his rest, and the cleric's respect, for he was a true champion who fought bravely against the abyss, but, unfortunately, had fallen in his war. The cleric entered the abyss and its inky black environment, determined to put an end to this corruption. In his time in the abyss, he encountered the wolf Sif, who was trapped by the darkness, and the cleric freed the companion of Artorius, so that he would not have to remain down here in the lightless cavern. He proceeded forward into the darkness as he hunted the father of the abyss. He came across the fogged gateway and knew Manus was on the other side. He prepared for a long fight and stepped through the portal into the father's chambers. Misshapen and twisted by the dark, Manus was here, and their confrontation began. Manus was fast and aggressive, using physical strength and dark magic to attack at the cleric in hopes of claiming victory over the goddess's chosen messenger. But the cleric studied his moves, watched patiently as Manus revealed his abilities and weaknesses. The cleric swung his mace, threw his bolts, and used his light to repel the attacks from the father. Slowly, the cleric started to shift the battle from victory being impossible, to seeming unlikely, to very possible, and finally to guaranteed. It felt to the cleric that he and Manus were locked in battle for hours. At the end, though, the cleric was left standing victorious. The Father of the Abyss could not defeat this conduit, nor could it corrupt the cleric with his darkness. There was no stopping the goddess's champion now, and it would be a matter of time until the rest of Gwyn's roadblocks crumbled before him. He emerged from the abyss and began searching for Calamite the dragon. The last great enemy remaining in Ulasil would meet the same fate as Manus once the cleric was able to locate him. He encountered a gravesite for Artorius and a single mourner dressed in robes. He spoke with this mysterious person, and she claimed to be a dear friend of the fallen knight. She asked for the soul of Artorius so she could provide proper respects. The cleric sensed she was genuine in her words and handed over the soul of the great knight. Artorius may have been an enemy when they met, but he had tried his best to defeat the darkness. The cleric respected him and his effort and wanted his soul to rest as well. The cleric was able to locate the battlefield where Calamite was, and with some help from a great archer, he would be able to meet the dragon on fair ground. The dragon attacked with tooth and claw, magic and flame. He hit hard and moved quickly. The cleric observed each movement carefully. He studied the range and limits of each attack Calamite could throw, and found his openings to counter. The dragon was tough, but he could not continue taking hits from the divine mace and direct strikes from the holy lightning bolts for long. One poorly placed fire breath attack was all the opening the cleric needed to end the fight. With a few steps back to exit the range, he loosed a lightning bolt straight into the dragon's chest, and it was over. Every threat in Ulasil was dealt with, and the land of the past would be safe for a while. With that, the cleric returned to the present and visited the grave of Artorias, hoping to find the item he would need to challenge the Four Kings. As he approached the incredibly old grave he had just seen when it was brand new, the cleric felt a presence looming over him. He looked up to see that a colossal wolf was guarding the resting place of Artorias. Was this the wolf Sif that he freed from the abyss all those years ago? That would mean the loyal companion of the night stood watch over his grave for hundreds of years, never leaving his master's side. The cleric, caught off guard by this revelation, was able to be pinned to the ground by the wolf's massive paw. Sif paused, then sniffed the cleric as a sign of recognition crossed his eyes. The great wolf knew this was the same cleric who freed him from his prison hundreds of years ago. The same cleric who released Artorias from his madness and freed his master from the fate where the night became what he fought so bravely against. Sif let out a mournful howl as both the great wolf's and the cleric's hearts broke over what they knew was about to happen. Sif knew the cleric needed the ring of Artorias to finish his journey, and the cleric knew Sif's last mission was to protect their master's gravesite at all costs. They both sadly prepared for battle, but this would be an honorable duel between two combatants that respected one another greatly. The battle was short, and the great wolf fought bravely. The cleric did not want to slay this wonderful creature, but he had no choice. He let one final attack fly, and it landed true as Sif charged for an attack. Sif fell, and was dead before hitting the ground. At least the cleric could provide a quick and clean end for the faithful companion. He stared on, not moving for a while, contemplating what he had just done. He moved to the final unexplored area, Ash Lake. A hydra foolishly attacked the cleric and paid the price for its recklessness. The cleric was at his full power once more, his time in Lordran drawing to a close. He spotted something in the distance on the beach, and it appeared to be two of the Katarina knights, but one was prone and not moving. The cleric rushed to their location, and he spoke to the knight that was still standing. Sigland had slain gentle Sigmire, as he too had lost his humanity. Sigland and the cleric stood over the body of the fallen Onion Knight, and mourned the loss of the brave and kind-hearted soul. The cleric said a prayer for him, and vowed Gwyn would pay for all he had done, all he had allowed to happen, due to his own self-importance and disinterest in the people of this world he was supposed to be the god of. The cleric continued on. He headed into the New Londo ruins next to seek the Four Kings and their final Lord Soul. Another former ally had rushed forward, now mad as well. The cleric quickly dealt with this crestfallen warrior and proceeded further into the haunted ruins of New Londo. He came to a tower and stared down the center, knowing the final pieces of the abyss he had defeated so long ago were mounting an offensive just below where he stood. He thanked Artorias and slipped his ring on, and jumped. The kings could do nothing to the blessed warrior, as he had already bested the abyss once, and under much worse circumstances. Their best attacks were immediately healed by the power of the goddess, and his strikes landed where they were intended to. 4 kings had attempted to stop him in the name of Gwyn, and 4 kings had fallen in the name of the goddess. He collected the final Lord Soul needed, and decided to visit Firelink Shrine once more. Griggs was now missing, and the cleric did not have to guess what had happened. He tracked the sorcerer to the fortress, and was not surprised to see the spellcaster had become rabid. The cleric did not come here to bring rescue, though. He came to bring an end to the man's suffering. Every loose end had been tied up, and the cleric was ready for Gwyn. He placed the Lord Souls in the vessel and opened the doors to Gwyn's realm. For all that had been lost in Lordran, for all the people the cleric tried to help, for every ally he had to put down, and for every servant that was betrayed by the fallen god, the cleric would demand payment on behalf of the world. Lordran was crumbling, and Gwyn, too terrified to do anything to save it, let it crumble. Gwyn knew his time was over, and the cleric would be the one to end it, but he would not go down without a fight. The cleric and Gwyn rushed toward each other, and the fallen god leapt with his blazing sword out and swung. The cleric was ready and parried his attack, slamming his divine mace into Gwyn and knocking him prone. Gwyn stood up and looked around confused as it dawned on him this mortal man was about to snuff his flame out. Every attack Gwyn attempted was either swatted away, dodged, or a glancing blow that the cleric recovered from quickly. The end came rapidly for the Lord of Cinder as the cleric unleashed a blast of the goddess's divine power, extinguishing the fallen god's flames and dropping him to his knees. The battle was over, and Gwyn was no more. One last task now. Bring the goddess's light to the world. The cleric approached the first flame, his heart resolute in what he knew would come next. He would sacrifice himself to bring light back to the world, as the goddess had instructed, and his love for the goddess was absolute. As the flames consumed his body, the cleric felt the goddess shine her light on him, and he knew his journey had come to an end.